Okay, today we're going to be talking about verbs. Our lesson over verbs will take us 2 days. So we're going to do part 1 today and part 2 on our next parts of speech day because there are multiple different types of verbs. So it's going to take us a bit longer to get through the content for this one. So like I said, 3 types of verbs. There's action verbs, linking verbs, and helping verbs. Today we're going to cover the first 2, action and linking. Every sentence will have either an action verb or a linking verb. Okay, so you won't have both, but you will always have one or the other, either an action verb or a linking verb. This is called the main verb. So if I say find the main verb, you're going to be looking for action or linking. Sentences may or may not have helping verbs alongside the main verb. So they're not required, but they are sometimes there. So this is just an overview. We're going to talk really in depth about all 3 types of verbs and practice finding all 3 types and all that kind of stuff. But it's important to understand going in that every sentence will have a main verb, which is either action or linking, and there may be helping verbs with it, but there may not be. The main verb plus any helping verbs, so basically all the verbs in a sentence, is called the verb phrase. Okay, so if I say verb phrase, that's what I'm talking about. So first thing we're going to talk about today is action verbs. Action verbs express the action being done in a sentence. Pretty straightforward. That's why they named it that, right? Action verbs express the action. So these are things that you can do, right? Action verbs are things that you can do. Things that you can do physically, like travel, sit, or build, right? These are things that you do with your body. There's also action verbs that are still things that you do, but they're more like things that you do internally, things that you do with your mind, like remember or think or know. These are all action verbs, right? All things that you can do. So let's practice finding some action verbs. In this first sentence, the ancient Egyptians constructed elaborate tombs for their rulers. Go ahead and try to find the action verb in that sentence and highlight it in your notes. I'll show you the answer in just a moment. Our answer here is constructed. Constructing is what the Egyptians are doing in this sentence, and that makes it the action verb, constructed. Next one, I recall my very first phone number. I recall my very first phone number. The action verb in this sentence is recall, right? Recall means like remember, and that is the action that the person in this sentence is doing. They're recalling the number. One more. Marcia smiled and clapped her hands. This one actually has 2 actions going on. Marcia's doing 2 things. She's smiling and clapping. So smiled and clapped are our 2 action verbs. So these are the easier, I think, of the 2 types of main verbs. You're just looking for the action. You're looking for what someone in the sentence is doing. Okay, that's the action verb. If there's no action verb, you probably have a linking verb. And linking verbs express state of being, which means that they express like what something is. Instead of what something is doing, they just express what something is. They connect the subject, linking verbs connect the subject to a word or phrase that identifies or describes it. Like I said, every sentence will have either an action or a linking verb. So if you are looking at a sentence and you're like, I don't see a verb, I don't see any actions, no one in this sentence is doing anything, you probably have a linking verb. So you should start looking for a linking verb at that point. Look for action first, and if there's no action, you know there's got to be a linking verb. So very similar to pronouns. These are the only linking verbs. So all you have to do is memorize this list. These are the only linking verbs that exist. If it's not on this list, it's not going to be a linking verb. So keep this list handy because it will be very helpful when you're trying to find linking verbs. So let's practice finding some linking verbs. First one, Miss Lee is an English teacher in Charleston, Missouri. So when you read this sentence, you're probably like, there is no verb here. No one is doing anything. Miss Lee in this sentence is not doing anything. That you're right. That means there's no action verb. And instead we have a linking verb. And our linking verb in this sentence is. Like I said, linking verbs express what something is, right? So this is expressing that Miss Lee is an English teacher. It's also connecting the subject, Miss Lee, to that describing phrase, an English teacher in Charleston, Missouri, right? That phrase describes Miss Lee, so you know it's a linking verb, right? The linking verbs link the subject to their description. Okay, so our linking verb in this one is. Next one, are those eggs already expired? This one's tricky. Questions are always tricky because the word order gets a little bit mixed up. But the linking verb here is are. Even though it's at the beginning of the sentence, it's still expressing what the eggs are, right? It's expressing the state of being of the eggs, and it's also connecting the eggs to their description, expired. So yeah, are is the linking verb here. Next one, Julia seems very good at geometry. Julia seems very good at geometry. Our linking verb here is seems. Seems is expressing what Julia is. It's also connecting Julia to the description, very good at geometry. We have one more here. The cows were all under the shady trees on that hot July day. So what's our linking verb here? What is expressing what something is and connecting it to a description? Our answer here is were. Cows is the subject, and were is connecting the cows to their description, which is under the shady trees on that hot July day. I'm sorry. So were here is our linking verb. So like I said, these are harder to spot than action verbs because they don't feel very verby. But as long as you have that list handy, you should be good. There is, of course, a trick to it, and that's that sometimes there are verbs that can be either action or linking, just like sometimes some words can be either a pronoun or an adjective, like we discussed in our last lesson. Some words can be either action or linking, so you have to pay attention to what the verb is doing in that sentence in order to figure out which it is. These are the verbs that can be either. It's mainly the ones that are associated with the five senses, things like feel, smell, taste, also things like appear, remain, stay. Okay, so these are the ones that can be either. So when you see these verbs, you're going to have to pay close attention to what they're doing in the sentence. It's an action verb if someone in the sentence is physically doing that action. It's a linking verb if it's used to connect something to a description of it. Okay, so let's look at some examples. The leaves turned brown versus the ballerina turned in circles. In the ballerina turned in circles, turning is something that the ballerina is physically doing with her body. So that one is an action verb. In the leaves turned brown, turned is just connecting the leaves to their description, brown, right? The leaves in this sentence are not spinning around, so you know that one's a linking verb. The next one, Jackie tasted the cake batter versus the cake tasted delicious and sweet. In the first sentence, Jackie tasted the cake batter. Jackie is physically putting the cake batter in her mouth and tasting it. That's an action that she's doing, so that is an action verb. In the other one, the cake tasted delicious and sweet. No one is tasting anything, right? The cake is not licking something and tasting it. Tasted is just a linking verb here that's linking the cake to its description. Okay, so you have to keep your eye out for this kind of thing. If someone in the sentence is doing the action, then it's an action verb. If no one in the sentence is doing any actions, then it's probably a linking verb that's just connecting the subject to a description of it. Okay, so this is a a little bit tricky. You just have to pay close attention to what's going on in the sentence to figure out if these 5 senses verbs are action or linking. Okay, so let's do our examples. For these, you have to both find the verb and figure out which verb it is. Is it action or is it linking? In your notes, what you're going to do is you're going to find the verb and highlight it. If it's an action verb, you're going to highlight it in yellow. If it's a linking verb, you're going to highlight it in blue. Okay, so here's our first example. Tom grew tomatoes in his garden last summer. This is one of those verbs that can be either action or linking. So you need to figure out, is it an action that he's doing? Growing is our verb here. It could be either action or linking. You have to find out, is it an action that he's doing, or is it just used to connect him to a description? Tom, what do you think? We know that it's grew, like I said, and it is an action. Growing is a physical action that he's doing here. He is growing the tomatoes, meaning like planting them in the ground and watering them and, taking care of them and that kind of thing. It's an action. Grow here is an action verb. Rachel and Adam are step siblings. So find your verb here. First, look for actions. If there are no actions, then move on to a linking verb. See if you can find a linking verb here. Our verb here is are, and it is a linking verb, right? Rachel and Adam, are is the subject, and are is connecting Rachel and Adam with their description, which is step siblings. Okay, are here is a linking verb, so it should be blue in your notes. Next one. After a day in the sun, the garbage smelled putrid. After a day in the sun, the garbage smelled putrid. So first let's find the verb, and then let's figure out if it's action or linking. Our verb here is smelled. Our verb here is smelled, and this is on the list that can be either action or linking. So let's figure out which it is. It is action if somebody is physically sniffing something and like perceiving its smell. It's linking if it's used to describe the subject, to connect the subject to its description. So our subject here is garbage. Is smelled connecting the garbage to putrid, which is a description of it? Yes, it is. So smelled here is a linking verb. We have one more example. The baby feels the texture of her soft new blanket. So find the verb here. What is the baby doing? She is feeling the blanket, right? Feeling the blanket. This also is on the list of verbs that can be action or linking. So how do you tell which one it is? It's action if the baby is physically doing the action of touching and feeling something. It's linking if feels is just used to describe something about the baby. So what do you think? Action or linking? It's action. The baby is actually touching the blanket. And that's how we know that this is an action verb. So this was our last example for today. So once your notes are all filled out, you'll be ready to move on to your practice problems. Today, you'll be having to find and label action and linking verbs. And tomorrow, we'll add the last type of verb in there and finish our learning of the verbs. So you're ready to do your first day of verbs homework now. Good job.